Hi, I got this from my sister. She wanted me to look youthful on my presentation on camera. It's not going to work. The story I have for you tonight is about the things we carry with us, and it comes from my favorite book, Oilcloth Stories by Carol Henn. It's short stories about the immigrants who settled in Bethlehem. The story I have tonight is called Treasures. Now, both sets of my grandparents were immigrants. This is true of my husband's parents too, and probably most of the children that were in my class in school. But we don't have any great-grandfather's watch or great-grandmother's Tiffany vase because they came here off the boat, as we used to say. Whatever they had was in a suitcase or a trunk, unless some of my cousins out there are keeping something from me that they have that I don't know about. I don't have any treasures, but I do have one thing that I call a treasure. My Aunt Margaret was the oldest of all the children in my mother's family, and there were 11. And when she was a small girl, my grandmother went back to Czechoslovakia to visit her cousins. And maybe because of that visit and that connection at that time, my Aunt Margaret was the only one who kept in touch with the family. So, when she retired from work, she had a dream of going back to Czechoslovakia and seeing these people. So her children organized a 65th birthday party for her, and they invited all that big family and all their friends, and everybody brought gifts, a donation, or whatever you want to call it, and there was plenty of money for my Aunt Margaret to go to Czechoslovakia. When she returned, she brought gifts for people, for everybody, I guess. And my mother got this plastic bag, and inside it looked like a bunch of thread that maybe Catherine's cat got a hold of, and it was a big old mess, and we couldn't even figure out what it was. And we took it out of the bag, and we stretched it a little in this way and that way, and we realized that it was a piece of needlework. But we didn't know what. It was obviously too small to be a tablecloth, and it was too big to be a doily. And so we pretty much went back into that little mess in that plastic bag and sat there for years. And then one day I said to my mother, could I have that? I think I want to figure it out. And she gave it to me, and then I had the plastic bag for years. Until I moved here to Tennessee, and one day I took out that piece of thread and I stretched it this way and that, and I said, I think this thing is a circle. And I think if I, stretch it and pin it evenly, I'll find out what it is. This is what it was. Now, I think I have it on good authority that this was made by a cousin of my mother's in Czechoslovakia, and this is my treasure. But my story is called The Treasure as well. Bella Volkroff sat in his kitchen table. It was 1991, and he was reading the newspaper, and he saw a story about the 250th anniversary of the city of Bethlehem. The organizers for the festivities wanted to honor all the nationalities and cultures that had made the city what it was. And so they decided that they would have an exhibition where people could bring their handicrafts and heirlooms or whatever they had, and they would put them on display, and they would label them, and then people could come and see them. And already the committee was inundated with intricately embroidered dresses and beribboned vests, and Polish women sent headdresses, and there was handmade shoes from Italy, and there were musical instruments, and the Mexicans and the Latinos had sombreros and hand-carved castanets. Bella thought he knew people would be interested in his treasure. And he got up and he went over to the china closet and took out his plastic bag and opened it up and thought about his mother and the story. His mother, Marina, in 1917, was a servant in no less an auspicious place as the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. Because she had a little bit of education and a pleasing personality, and she could sew really well, the Tsarina Alexander had taken a shine to her. In 1918, the Tsar Nicholas had to abdicate the throne because there was a revolution. And the Tsarina expected that her family would be deported to England. And so she and her personal maid, Anna, with the help of Marina, were going through her things, deciding what she would take, packing. And she came across a small evening bag, and she looked at it, and she realized that she wouldn't see any of the people working in the palace or the palace again. And she remembered that Marina had deftly repaired the embroidery on this bag, and impulsively she gave it to Marina, and she said, "Here, you can keep this as a memory of me." Oh, Maria was so happy. She impulsively threw her arms around the Tsarina, and the Tsarina gently took her arms off her and kissed her on the forehead. And the next day or so, the royal family left. And the servants who were left behind, including Marina, thought, maybe we shouldn't stay here. After all, we work for the Tsar and there's a revolution going on. So she teamed up with another family and decided to get out of there, away from the fighting, and she traveled south and west, working in farms for room and board, and the whole time the little purse stayed wrapped in cotton in her bodice. Eventually, she met Alexei Volkroff. Alexei was a farmer, and Marina and Alexei both had the dream that they would go to America. And in 1918, they were ready to go. July 16, 1918, they left from the port of Danzig. They stood on the bow of the ship as it moved away from their homeland, not realizing that 1,000 miles away, the Tsar, Nicholas, Tsarina, Alexander, their children, Anna, and any other servants that they had there, were being led into the basement to be massacred by gunshot. Bella looked at the purse now. It was a bronze color, and it had a gold clasp, and it had diamonds and pearls embedded in the top. There was a embroidery on it, and that had diamonds and pearls and topaz in it. And he remembered that his mother didn't tell her children the story until they were teenagers. She took out the purse and she pointed out where she had mended it, and she said, "Now, this letter here, I know it looks like an H to you, but it's not an H. It is in Russian. An H looks like an N, and the N stands for Nicholas. So royal things had a letter like this on them." And then she showed the children the jewels on it, and Bella had to laugh. He remembered his 16-year-old self, and he said, "How much is it worth, Mom?" She said, "It is worth all the money in the world to me, and it should be worth that much to you too." Now, Bella thought about putting the purse in the exhibition. No. This was his family's pride. There was no guarantee it wouldn't get lost or stolen. And no amount of insurance money could buy another purse that once belonged to the Tsarina Alexandra. He wouldn't do it. Across town, Celeste McGillis was reading the same article in the newspaper, and she looked up at the wall, at the painting that was her family's treasure. Anybody who came into the house who wasn't an art aficionado would just think it was a Alexei painting. They wouldn't know the story, but she knew. The painting originally belonged to her great-great-great-grandmother, whose name was Bertha. She lived in France. And she lived in the same town as Claude and Camille Monet. Now, Camille wasn't well, and she never recovered from her second pregnancy, plus she had tuberculosis. Bertha was hired to care for Camille, and the two women, bonded, and she fell in love with the family, and the family fell in love with Bertha, and she did everything she could for Camille, but unfortunately, Camille passed away. 2 years later, Claude Monet decided to take his family and move away to another town, and before he left, he gifted a painting that he had done of his wife when she was young and pretty and outside in the garden wearing an orchid dress and the flowers and the sunlight. And Bertha treasured that painting. It came to America with her grandson, and now it just hung on a wall in a house in Hay Street. It had been authenticated and insured, and the family had turned down a bid on it from Christie's. There was no guarantee that it couldn't get lost at this exhibition. Plus, Celeste wasn't so sure she wanted every Tom, Dick, and Harry to know that she had a Monet painting hanging in her home on Hay Street. And so, neither one put their treasure in the exhibition. But on the day that the exhibition opened, Bella and Camille both went, along with hundreds of people. They marveled at the handicrafts, the lavish clothing, the jewelry, the religious icons, the handmade shoes, the musical instruments. It was wonderful, and it was true that every family had a thing that held their memories, and every family had a story. So the festivities were coming to a halt, and the chairman made a speech, and at the end of it he said, "Here we are, surrounded by treasures. Treasures that remind us of people and places far away. We will always treasure these things and always remember." And as I look around this room today, at so many treasures, I doubt that anywhere in Bethlehem, in any corner of this city, are there any more treasures left to see. And Bella on one side of the hall, and Celeste on the other, both smiled. Thank you.